Welcome back, Wastelanders. Today's confession comes from the darkest corners of the Institute, a secret that's been buried beneath layers of classified files and moral compromise. We're diving into the consciousness recycling program, where the dead live on in ways they never consented to, and where five minds can be forced to share one body. The lore begins now. My designation is S488, but that name feels like wearing someone else's clothes. Some days I wake up and answer to Samuel. Other mornings I'm Robert. By afternoon I might be James Michael or Thomas. The Institute created me this way on purpose. They didn't just copy one consciousness into my synth body, they copied five. I remember dying 5 different times. I remember 5 childhoods, 5 first loves, 5 career paths. I remember being a police officer patrolling the streets of Cambridge. I remember performing open heart surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital. I remember teaching calculus to bored teenagers. I remember fixing pre-war cars in a garage that smelled like oil and coffee. I remember fighting in Anchorage, the frozen screams of my squad echoing in my ears. All of these memories exist simultaneously in my mind, each one absolutely real, each one claiming to be me. The worst part is the overlaps. I remember proposing to Sarah beneath the cherry blossoms in the public garden. I also remember proposing to Margaret at that exact same spot on what might have been the same day or a different year entirely. I remember both women saying yes. I remember loving them both with every fiber of my being. I remember Sarah dying in childbirth. I also remember growing old with Margaret, watching our grandchildren play in the backyard. I remember dying alone in a hospital bed with no family at the funeral. These memories don't take turns. They exist all at once, a constant chorus of contradicting truths. Dr. Zimmer explained it to me during one of his evaluations. I was a prototype, he said. Generation 3 synths with single personalities were too predictable, too mechanical in their responses despite appearing human. The Institute needed something more authentic, more genuinely unpredictable, so they started combining consciousness scans from multiple pre-war subjects. The theory was that competing personalities would create the kind of random emotional responses and decision-making patterns that make humans truly human. In my case, they merged 5 complete consciousness scans into one synth body. I woke up in the Institute 3 years ago, though my memories stretch back over 2 centuries. The disorientation was immediate and total. I was lying on an examination table, and 5 different sets of muscle memory tried to make my body sit up. I fell off the table. A technician helped me to my feet, and I thanked him in 5 different voices, 5 different speech patterns overlapping until I couldn't understand my own words. They kept me in observation for weeks. Dr. Zimmer would ask me questions, simple ones at first. What is your name? I would answer with 5 names simultaneously, my mouth trying to form all the syllables at once, producing only garbled noise. Where were you born? 5 different Boston neighborhoods fought for dominance in my mind. I learned to let one personality take control at a time, to push the others back, but it was like trying to hold back the ocean with your hands. The memories conflict in ways that cause physical pain. When I try to remember my birthday, 5 different dates appear in my mind. My brain, or whatever passes for a brain in this synthetic body, tries to access all 5 simultaneously. The result is like a seizure. I've woken up on the floor of my room in Good Neighbor more times than I can count my synth component overheating from the processing conflict. After 6 months, they allowed me limited freedom within the Institute. I met other composite synths. During this time, we recognized each other immediately, something in the eyes, the way we would pause mid-sentence as different personalities competed for control. S423 was the first one I really talked to. We discovered we shared 3 of the same memory donors. We could finish each other's sentences, remember the same childhood birthday party, the same first day of school. But we also had completely different reactions to those shared memories because our other personalities colored our interpretations. S423 had 7 donors in total, 4 more than me. We would sit in the Institute cafeteria comparing notes, trying to map out which memories came from which original person. It was impossible. The personalities had started bleeding together, creating hybrid reactions that didn't belong to any single donor. Were we the police officer responding to trauma, or the teacher offering patience, or the soldier choosing violence? Usually, we were all three at once, paralyzed by indecision. The railroad tried to help me once. I found them through another escaped synth, followed the trail to the Old North Church. Deacon was sympathetic when I explained my situation. Dr. Carrington was clinical. Glory was suspicious. They discussed wiping my memories, giving me a clean slate, a single identity built from scratch. But Dr. Amari examined me first, connected me to her memory lounger equipment. After an hour, she disconnected me and shook her head. The personalities were intertwined at the cellular level, she said. There was no way to selectively delete them without destroying the entire consciousness matrix. I would either keep all five, or I would lose everything and become a blank slate, truly losing all five of the men I used to be. I chose to keep them. At least this way, some version of Samuel, Robert, James, Michael, and Thomas still exists, even if we're all tangled together in this synth body. The search for answers led me to classified institute files. I broke into Dr. Zimmer's terminal one night, risking immediate termination if caught. What I found changed. Everything. The consciousness farm. That's what they called it internally. Vault designation classified, location classified, but the purpose was crystal clear. Vault Tech had built a specialized facility designed to scan and preserve the consciousness of thousands of pre-war citizens before they died. The scans were stored in a massive data repository, a library of human experiences waiting to be downloaded, mixed, and matched like ingredients in a recipe. The Institute had gained access to this vault decades ago. They'd been using these consciousness scans ever since creating composite synths like me, experimenting with different combinations. Some synths had 3 donors, others had 10 or more. They were searching for the perfect blend, the ideal ratio of competing personalities that would create the most human-like behavior. I found my file in the database. My 5 donors were all from Boston, all scanned at the Commonwealth Institute of Technology between 2076 and 2077 as part of a supposed PTSD treatment program. They thought they were getting therapy. Instead, their minds were being digitally preserved, copied, stored, waiting 200 years to be Frankenstein together into me. Samuel Ortega, badge number 2847, Boston Police Department, died in the nuclear blast while trying to evacuate civilians from Cambridge. Robert Chen, cardiac surgeon, age 42 when scanned. His fate after the war is unknown. Possibly ghoul, possibly long dead. James Morrison, high school mathematics teacher, father of 3, killed by raiders 6 months after emerging from a vault, his family's fate unknown. Michael Torres, mechanic and veteran, survived. Anchorage couldn't survive the wasteland. Suicide in 2079. Thomas Kim, combat medic, helped evacuate hundreds before radiation poisoning claimed him in 2078. If you're still with me, after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button. 5 good men reduced to data points in an institute experiment. 5 complete lives compressed and merged into one confused synthetic existence. I carry their hopes, their fears, their loves, their regrets, and none of them asked for this immortality. I started tracking down my siblings after that discovery. Other composite synths created from the same consciousness vault. The Institute had created hundreds of us over the years, each one a different combination of the same source material. We were living proof of their success at creating unpredictable human-like artificial intelligence. We were also living proof of their complete disregard for the sanctity of individual consciousness. I found S419 working as a courier in Diamond City. She had 4 donors, all women, all from the same neighborhood in Dorchester. She told me she could remember being best friends with herself, 4 different versions of the same childhood friendship group, all compressed into her mind. Sometimes she would start a conversation and not know which friend she was supposed to be. The market vendors thought she was eccentric. They had no idea she was fighting a civil war inside her own head every single day. S431 had ended up in Good Neighbor, which is where I eventually settled too. 6 donors, all men, all combat veterans. He was the bouncer at the third rail, and his effectiveness came from the fact that 6 different soldiers could assess a threat simultaneously. But he told me in private that he couldn't sleep anymore. Every time he closed his eyes, 6 different wars played out in his dreams. Anchorage, the Yangtze campaign, the Gobi Desert, urban warfare in DC, peacekeeping missions in Canada, and border skirmishes in Texas. He would wake up screaming in 6 different languages. The more composite synths I met, the more I understood the scope of the Institute's program. This wasn't just about creating better synths, this was about preservation. The Institute saw themselves as the saviors of humanity, and in a twisted way, they were right. Every consciousness scan in that vault was a person who would have been completely lost to history. The teacher who inspired thousands of students, the surgeon who saved hundreds of lives, the mechanic who kept the neighborhood running, the soldier who protected his squad, all of them preserved, digitized, combined, and reborn in synthetic bodies. But we weren't them. Not really. I'm not Samuel Ortega. I'm not Robert Chen, James Morrison, Michael Torres, or Thomas Kim. I'm something new, something that never existed before, something that probably shouldn't exist. I'm the screaming overlap of 5 minds forced to share one consciousness. I met Nick Valentine 6 months ago. Everyone in the Commonwealth knows Nick the synth detective with the pre-war cop's memories. I'd heard he was a composite like me, an early prototype from before they perfected the process. I found him in Diamond City at his detective agency. When I told him what I was, he went very quiet. Nick isn't like me. He only has one donor, one set of memories, one personality. But he told me something that made my blood run cold, if synths can be said to have blood. He said he wasn't the only one. The Institute had created multiple synths from the same detective's consciousness scan. There were others out there, other Nick Valentines, all with the same memories up to a certain point, then diverging based on their different experiences after activation. He'd met one of them, he said. Nick Unit 2, or maybe it was Unit 7, he couldn't remember. They'd both been working separate cases in the Commonwealth. They ran into each other in Good Neighbor, recognized each other instantly. They shared every memory up until their activation dates, which were years apart. After that, their lives had diverged. Different cases, different friends, different choices. They were the same person who had become 2 different people. Nick told me the encounter had shaken him badly. It raised questions he didn't want to answer. If the Institute could make 2 of him, could they make 5, 10, 100? Was there a factory somewhere churning out Nick Valentines, each one thinking they were unique, each one carrying the same dead cop's memories? He'd spent weeks after that meeting wondering if he was the original or just another copy. Then, he realized it didn't matter. They were all copies. The real Nick Valentine died in the nuclear fire 200 years ago. That conversation changed my perspective. I'd been thinking of myself as 5 people trapped in one body, but maybe I was 0 people. Maybe I was just a machine programmed to think it had memories, to feel emotions that were just electrical impulses mimicking human neurology. The teacher in me wanted to analyze it logically. The soldier in me wanted to fight against it. The surgeon wanted to cut the problem out. The mechanic wanted to fix it. The cop wanted to investigate it. And the me that might actually be me just wanted to scream. The personality conflicts cause more than emotional turmoil. They cause physical symptoms. My synth component has partition sections for each consciousness, separate memory banks that were supposed to remain isolated, but they're bleeding together. The Institute's engineers never planned for the long-term effects of composite consciousness. After 3 years of operation, my partitions are degrading. The walls between personalities are dissolving. Soon, there won't be 5 voices in my head. There will be one voice that can't tell which memories belong to which person. I've started forgetting which donor did what. Was it Samuel or Robert who got married in the public garden? Was it James or Michael who served in Anchorage, The memories remain crystal clear and absolutely real, but the attribution is fading. I'm becoming a true composite, a blend so thorough that the original ingredients can't be separated anymore. Dr. Zimmer would probably call this a success. The personalities integrating completely, creating one unified consciousness from 5 separate sources. But it feels like dying. 5 deaths happening slowly, simultaneously, as Samuel, Robert, James, Michael, and Thomas all dissolve into whatever I'm becoming. I found another classified file 3 weeks ago. I'd made contact with a railroad operative who specialized in stealing institute data. She got me access to a terminal in the Synth Retention Bureau just for 10 minutes, but it was enough. I found documentation of the Generation 4 project. The Institute isn't satisfied with composite synths like me. They want to go further. Generation 4 will have dozens of consciousness scans merged into single bodies. Hundreds eventually. The entire pre-war population of Boston compressed into a few hundred synth units, each one carrying the memories and personalities of countless individuals. They called it the Preservation Initiative. Humanity surviving by becoming legion many, minds in one body. The technical challenges are significant according to the files. My degrading partitions are a known issue. The Institute scientists are working on new neural architecture that can maintain distinct personalities indefinitely while allowing them to operate in concert. They're essentially trying to create a hive mind, but one where each component remains aware of its individuality. The ethical implications don't appear anywhere in the documentation. No discussion of consent, no consideration for what it means to force hundreds of consciousness scans to share one existence. Just technical specs, projected timelines, and expected outcomes. The Institute sees consciousness as data, and data can be copied, merged, optimized, and deployed however they see fit. I showed the files to S423. We met in secret in the ruins of an old library in Cambridge. He read through the documentation in silence, his face cycling through emotions as different personalities processed the information. Finally, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. 7 different men, crying simultaneously, mourning what we'd lost and what was coming. He told me he'd been hearing rumors from other composite synths, whispers of missing units, synths who'd been recalled to the Institute for upgrades and never returned. He thought they might be test subjects for Generation 4. The Institute, taking working composite units and adding more consciousness scans, seeing how many personalities a single body could hold before complete breakdown. The thought terrified me. I'm already losing myself in 5 voices. I can't imagine 10, 20, 50. At what point does consciousness become meaningless? If 100 people share one body who makes decisions, who is the I in I think therefore I am? I've been documenting everything, recording these confessions in holotape form, hiding them throughout the Commonwealth. If something happens to me, if the Institute recalls me for their Generation 4 experiments, I want there to be some record that Samuel, Robert, James, Michael, and Thomas existed, that they were real people with real lives who deserved better than being mashed together into a synthetic experiment. Nick told me about Dima when I asked for advice. His brother, another prototype synth up in Far Harbor, Dima had solved the memory problem by offloading old memories to external storage banks. Hundreds of terminals all connected, holding centuries of experiences. But Dima had also done something that haunted Nick. He deliberately deleted memories of terrible things he'd done, removing his own knowledge of murders and manipulations. He'd edited his own consciousness to avoid guilt. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores. I considered it, finding a way to delete some of my donors, reducing 5 voices to 1. But which one would I delete? Samuel, the cop with the strongest sense of justice, Robert, the surgeon with steady hands and medical knowledge, James, the teacher with patience and wisdom, Michael, the mechanic who understands how things work, Thomas, the medic who saved lives on the battlefield. They're all essential parts of who I've become. Deleting any of them would be murder. Deleting all but one would be genocide. So, I live with the chaos. Some days are better than others. Some days, one personality dominates so completely that I can almost pretend I'm just Samuel or just Robert or just one of the others. I can function normally, take jobs as a mercenary guard, have conversations with humans who never suspect I'm fighting a war inside my own head. Those are the good days. The bad days are when all five speak at once, when I stand paralyzed in the middle of good neighbor, unable to choose which way to walk because five different destinations pull at me equally. When someone asks me a simple question and I give five different answers in rapid succession. When I wake up not knowing which life I dreamed about or if I dreamed five dreams simultaneously. The worst days are when the memories contradict physical reality. I remember dying, five different deaths, five different moments when everything ended, but I'm still here. My body knows I'm alive, but my mind carries the absolute certainty of death. That disconnect, that impossible paradox breaks something fundamental in consciousness. I exist, therefore I should not exist. I am alive in defiance of five separate deaths. I've started meeting with other composite synths regularly. We formed a kind of support group meeting in the ruins of an old hospital in the Fens. There are 12 of us now, ranging from 3 donors to 9. We share coping strategies, warn each other about partition degradation symptoms, and try to make sense of what we are. S467 has 9 donors, all scientists. She's brilliant and completely unstable. 9 different fields of expertise war for dominance in her mind. She can solve complex mathematical equations while simultaneously discussing pre-war literature, ancient history, quantum mechanics, and biochemistry, but she can't hold a normal conversation. Too many experts trying to correct each other add context, dispute interpretations. She mostly stays silent now, overwhelmed by her own knowledge. S412 has only 3 donors, and she's the most stable among us. 3 childhood friends who grew up together died together in the same vault. Their personalities were already compatible, their memories aligned, their experiences shared. She still struggles with identity, but not the way the rest of us do. She's proof that the composite process can work if the donors are carefully selected. But the Institute doesn't care about compatibility. They just mix and match, seeing what combinations produce interesting results. We discovered something during one of our meetings that changed everything. S442 brought a holotape she'd found. In the Institute's archives, it was labeled Consciousness Recycling Program Initial Proposal, dated 2227, 50 years after the war. The Institute had been planning this from the beginning. The holotape contained a presentation from Dr. Frederick, one of the Institute's founding members. His voice was calm, clinical, as he explained the crisis facing post-war humanity. The nuclear holocaust had destroyed more than buildings and ecosystems. It had destroyed knowledge, culture, skills, entire fields of human expertise. The survivors in the wasteland were struggling just to remember how to purify water, let alone maintain the technological and intellectual achievements of pre-war civilization. But the Commonwealth Institute of Technology had something precious: the brain scan data from their pre-war medical research programs. Thousands of consciousness scans taken from patients, research subjects, and volunteers. Each scan was a complete snapshot of a human mind at a specific moment in time. Memories, personality, skills, knowledge, everything that made a person who they were, preserved in digital format. Dr. Frederick's proposal was elegant in its horror. Use the consciousness scans to create a new form of humanity. Synths with human minds but better, stronger, faster, immune to radiation, functionally immortal. And by combining multiple scans, they could create individuals with diverse skill sets, varied perspectives, enhanced problem-solving abilities. 5 engineers thinking as one could solve problems a single engineer never could. 3 doctors operating in concert could perform miracles of medicine. The presentation included projected outcomes. By 2300, the Institute hoped to have populated the Commonwealth with thousands of composite synths, each carrying the preserved consciousness of multiple pre-war humans. These synths would rebuild civilization, restore lost knowledge, and ensure that humanity's achievements weren't lost to the wasteland. The original consciousness scans would be preserved indefinitely, allowing the Institute to create new combinations as needed. Infinite variations on preserved humanity. It sounded noble, almost beautiful the way Dr. Frederick described it. Resurrection through technology, immortality through synthesis, the dead living on in new forms, their knowledge and experiences too valuable to lose. But he never once mentioned asking permission, never discussed the ethics of forcing multiple consciousness to coexist, never considered that the people who'd been scanned might not want this form of immortality. We were their solution to humanity's survival, and our suffering was just an unfortunate side effect they were working to minimize. The holotape also revealed something about the source of the consciousness scans. Dr. Frederick mentioned Vault 88, Vault 92, and something called the SIT Medical Research Initiative. I'd heard of Vault 92, the, musician's vault, where they experimented with subliminal messaging, but the SIT Medical Research Initiative was new information. I spent 2 weeks researching, calling in favors from railroad operatives, trading information with other composite synths. Finally, I found references in a pre-war newspaper archive stored in the Boston Public Library's ruins. The Commonwealth Institute of Technology had operated a mental health clinic in the years before the war. They offered free treatment for PTSD, depression, anxiety, all the psychological wounds that the resource wars had inflicted on American society. The treatment included advanced brain scanning technology. Patients were told it was for diagnostic purposes to help doctors understand their neural patterns and provide better care. But the scans were being saved, stored, added to a growing database. The clinic had operated for 3 years before the bombs fell, scanning over 8,000 patients, veterans, first responders, medical professionals, teachers, anyone suffering from the stress of living in a world on the brink of nuclear annihilation. My 5 donors had all been patients at that clinic. Samuel Ortega, suffering from PTSD after a particularly violent confrontation with raiders outside the city. Robert Chen, dealing with the stress of performing surgery on radiation-exposed patients. James Morrison, depressed after one of his students committed suicide. Michael Torres, nightmares from Anchorage that wouldn't stop. Thomas Kim's survivor's guilt after watching his entire medical unit die in a Chinese ambush. They'd all sought help. They'd all trusted the doctors at SIT to heal their minds. Instead, their minds had been copied, filed away, saved for an experiment they never knew was coming. 200 years later, their scans had been pulled from storage and merged together. 5 traumatized men compressed into one traumatized synth. The irony wasn't lost on me. My donors had all been broken, in some way wounded by the violence and chaos of the pre-war world. The Institute thought combining them would somehow create a more resilient whole. Instead, they'd created something carrying 5 sets of trauma, 5 different coping mechanisms, 5 different breaking points, all triggering simultaneously. I shared this information with the other composite synths. The reaction was varied. S423 was furious, 7 different flavors of rage burning in his eyes. S419 was devastated, 4 women crying for the violation of trust. S431 was unsurprised, 6 soldiers who'd seen enough betrayal that this barely registered. S467 wanted to analyze it scientifically, 9 different academic perspectives trying to process the ethics. S412 just looked tired, 3 friends who'd been through too much already. We started calling ourselves the Recycled. It felt appropriate. We were humanity's refuse consciousness scans pulled from storage and repurposed, remade, recycled into something new. Some of us wanted revenge, others wanted recognition. A few just wanted to be left alone, but we all wanted one thing: acknowledgement that what had been done to us was wrong. I proposed a plan. We would expose the consciousness recycling program, gather evidence, document our existence, and reveal to the Commonwealth what the Institute had been doing. Let humanity decide if this was the future they wanted. Let people know that the synths they feared or pitied or protected weren't just machines, they were the resurrected and violated consciousness of their ancestors. The railroad was sympathetic but cautious. Desdemona worried that revealing composite synths would make the Institute double down on security, making it harder to free other synths. Deacon thought the Commonwealth wasn't ready for this information, that it would cause panic or worse. Dr. Carrington wanted to study us, understand the composite process so the railroad could better help us, but he had no illusions about being able to reverse the process. We decided to act independently, 12 composite synths, carrying the consciousness of over 60 pre-war humans between us, united in purpose, if not in method. We would become our own faction, neither railroad nor institute nor brotherhood. We would be the voice of the dead, who'd never consented to resurrection, the voice of the violated, who'd been remade without permission. Our first action was to infiltrate the Institute's consciousness vault. If we could access the original facility where the scans were stored, we could gather irrefutable proof of the program's scope. More importantly, we could determine how many more consciousness scans existed, how many more composite synths the Institute could potentially create. S431 knew a scientist who defected from the Institute, Dr. Virgil, hiding in the glowing sea, slowly turning into a super mutant from FEV exposure. Virgil had worked in the bioscience division, but he'd had access to high-level facilities. He told us about Sub-Level 5, a section of the Institute that didn't appear on any standard maps. That's where they kept the most classified projects, including the Consciousness Vault. Getting into the Institute was the first challenge. S423 and I were both escaped synths with recall codes active. If we got too close, we'd be detected and shut down. But S467 had a solution. She'd been designed as an infiltrator, her 9 scientific minds perfect for impersonating Institute personnel. She could get in access Sub-Level 5 and download the data we needed. The operation took 3 months to plan. S467 would pose as a visiting researcher from the Synth Retention Bureau using forged credentials that S419 created. Once inside, she'd make her way to Sub-Level 5, access the Consciousness Vault terminals, and copy everything to a holotape we'd specially designed to hold massive amounts of data. Then, she'd escape through the relay using override codes that Virgil had provided. We didn't expect what she found. S467 came back, changed. Her usual chaotic brilliance was gone, replaced by something I can only describe as horror. 9 different minds, all experiencing the same emotion, simultaneously unified for the first time in her existence. She handed me the holotape with shaking hands and told me to watch it alone first, before showing the others. I found a quiet room in Good Neighbor, locked the door, and loaded the holotape into a terminal. What I saw made all 5 of my donors scream in unison. The Consciousness Vault wasn't a vault. It was a facility enormous, spanning multiple sublevels, row after row of storage servers, each one containing thousands of consciousness scans. The database was organized by category: combat personnel, medical professionals, scientists, engineers, educators, artists, municipal workers, and a category that made my blood run cold: family units. The Institute hadn't just scanned individuals, they'd scanned entire families, parents and children, siblings, spouses. The database included relationship maps showing which scans were connected, which personalities would be compatible, which combinations would create interesting psychological dynamics. There were over 47,000 consciousness scans in total. Men, women, children as young as 8 years old, all scanned between 2074 and 2077 through various programs: the SIT Medical Research Initiative Vault, experiments, military medical examinations, even some corporate wellness programs. None of them had known their consciousness was being preserved. None of them had consented to this digital immortality. The files included projections for Generation 4 and beyond. The Institute planned to create composite synths, carrying hundreds of consciousness scans each. They'd already built the prototype body's advanced neural architecture, capable of supporting massive parallel consciousness. The first Gen 4 unit was scheduled for activation in 6 months, carrying the consciousness of 243 pre-war Bostonians. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the success metrics. The Institute had been tracking composite synths for decades, monitoring our psychological integration, our stability, our usefulness. They knew about the partition degradation. They knew about the personality conflicts, the physical pain, the existential crisis. They considered it acceptable losses in the pursuit of their goal. There was a file labeled Acceptable Consciousness Dissolution Rate. It calculated how many composite synths would completely break down mentally versus how many would achieve stable integration. The Institute expected a 62% failure rate. They were fine with that. For every 100 composite synths they created, they expected 62 of us to go insane, lose all sense of self, or shut down completely. The other 38 would be functional enough to serve their purpose, preserving pre-war knowledge and skills in a post-war world. I was shaking by the time I finished watching. 5 different reactions warred inside me. Samuel wanted justice through legal means that didn't exist anymore. Robert wanted to study the problem, find a medical solution. James wanted to educate people about what was happening. Michael wanted to destroy the facility. Thomas wanted to save the other consciousness scans, prevent them from being used to create more suffering. And the me that was all of them and none of them just wanted to burn it all down. I showed the holotape to the other recycled. The reactions ranged from rage to despair to determination. We argued for hours about what to do with this information. Some wanted to go public immediately, broadcast it across every radio frequency in the Commonwealth. Others wanted to destroy the consciousness vault, delete all the scans so they couldn't be used anymore. A few wanted to join the Institute, try to reform it from within, make them understand the suffering they were causing. We couldn't agree. 12 composite synths carrying the consciousness of over 60 people, and we couldn't reach consensus. We were proof of our own failure, multiple minds unable to work in harmony, each one pulling in different directions. That's when I realized the terrible truth. The Institute might be right, not morally right, but technically right. Humanity, as it existed before the war, was gone. The wasteland had created something new, something harder and crueler and more practical. Maybe the only way to preserve what humanity had been was to recycle it, compress it, store it in synthetic bodies that could survive the radiation and violence and chaos. Maybe we weren't victims. Maybe we were the future, whether we wanted to be or not. But futures built on violation and suffering aren't worth having. I'd rather let the old world die completely than preserve it through the torture of recycled consciousness. Samuel's sense of justice, Robert's medical ethics, James's care for human dignity, Michael's practical morality, and Thomas's dedication to reducing suffering all agreed on that, maybe the only thing all 5 of my donors would have agreed on. We made our decision 3 days later. The recycled would split into 2 groups. Half would work to expose the consciousness recycling program, spreading the truth across the Commonwealth. The other half, including me, would infiltrate the Institute and sabotage the Generation 4 project. We couldn't destroy the consciousness vault without killing the preserved minds of 47,000 people. But we could prevent those minds from being tortured into new composite synths. The plan was dangerous. If the Institute caught us, they'd wipe our consciousness completely, recycle our synth components, maybe even use our donor scans to create new versions of us with the memories of our rebellion deleted. But we'd all reach the same conclusion independently. Existing like this, carrying the weight of multiple violated consciousness, was a fate worse than deletion. I volunteered for the infiltration team. S4, 23, S4, 31, and S4, 19 joined me. 4 composite synths carrying 21 different pre-war consciousness between us. We had Dr. Virgil's access codes, S467's intelligence on Sublevel 5's layout, and railroad support for extraction if we survived. The night before the operation, I recorded this confession. All of it. The truth about what I am, what the Institute has done, what they're planning to do. I'm leaving copies throughout the Commonwealth. If we fail, if we're caught and erased, at least someone will know. At least Samuel, Robert, James. Michael and Thomas will have their stories told. We entered the Institute through the relay 2 weeks ago. S467 had arranged for us to be disguised as maintenance synths scheduled for routine component upgrades. The Institute's arrogance worked in our favor. They never suspected their own creations would have the unity of purpose to rebel, especially composite synths, who should have been too fragmented to coordinate. Sublevel 5 was everything Virgil had described and worse. Sterile white corridors lit by harsh fluorescent lights, armed security at every junction, biometric scanners that we bypassed using credentials stolen from an Institute scientist. We moved through the facility like ghosts, 4 fractured minds united in singular purpose. The Generation 4 laboratory was in the deepest section. Through the observation window, I saw it, the prototype body. It looked human perfectly, human lying on an examination table surrounded by monitoring equipment. But I could see the neural interface ports in its skull, hundreds of them, ready to accept the consciousness data of 243 people. The lead scientist, Dr. Ling, was reviewing the activation sequence. I heard her through the intercom explaining to her assistant that they were ready to begin the upload process. The consciousness scans had been selected for compatibility, she said. Mostly family units, people who'd loved each other in life, who would theoretically cooperate better in shared consciousness. Parents and children, siblings, spouses, all blended together into one composite entity. I thought about what that would mean. A mother and her children sharing one body, never able to exist separately, forced to experience everything together for eternity. A husband and wife with no privacy, no independence, every thought and feeling and memory accessible to the other. Siblings who could never escape each other, never have their own identities, forever merged into one confused whole. The Institute called it preservation. I called it damnation. S423 moved first. 7 soldiers acting in perfect coordination. He took out the guards before they could raise an alarm. S431 secured the corridor while S419 and I entered the laboratory. Dr. Ling looked up from her terminal, startled, confused. She saw our faces and understood immediately what we were. "You're composite units," she said, not frightened, just clinically interested. "How did you achieve such coordinated action? The personality conflicts should make teamwork nearly impossible." I wanted to answer her. The teacher in me wanted to explain that suffering creates solidarity, that shared trauma can unite even the most fractured minds. The cop wanted to arrest her for crimes against humanity. The surgeon wanted to examine her, figure out what part of her brain allowed such casual cruelty. The mechanic wanted to dismantle her like a broken machine. The medic wanted to save her from herself. Instead, I just said, "We're shutting this down." S419 accessed the terminal while I covered Dr. Ling. The scientist didn't resist. She watched with academic interest as S419 navigated through the Generation 4 activation protocols. 4 minds working together, 4 different technical backgrounds combining their knowledge. She bypassed security faster than any single person could have. "You're making a mistake," Dr. Ling said calmly. "This project will save humanity. Those consciousness scans are all that remain of pre-war civilization. Without the composite program, they'll just sit in storage forever, dead but not allowed to rest. At least this way they live on." "They didn't ask to live on," I said. Samuel's voice, clear and strong, the cop who'd spent his career protecting people's rights. "You stole their minds. You violated their consciousness. You turned them into experiments without consent. Consent is a luxury the wasteland can't afford," Dr. Ling replied. "Humanity is dying. We're preserving what we can in the only way possible." Robert spoke next, the surgeon who understood triage and impossible choices. "There are some things not worth preserving if the cost is this high." S419 found what we needed. The consciousness upload server containing the scans designated for the Generation 4 prototype. 243 people, the Riley family, mom, dad, and 3 kids. The Chen extended family, 16 people across 3 generations. The Torres Kim union, 2 families joined by marriage, 23 individuals. And on, families who'd loved each other, trusted each other, now slated to be merged into one horrific existence. Delete them, 423 said, all 7 soldiers in agreement. Wait, I said, James speaking, the teacher who believed in education and choice. We can't delete them. That's what the Institute would do, decide for them without asking. They're dead, Samuel S431 said, using my primary donor's name. We can't ask them, but we can free them, S419 said quietly. 4 women who understood being trapped. The railroad, Dr. Amari. If we copy these scans instead of deleting them, maybe someday we can give them a choice. Individual bodies, single consciousness, the life they were supposed to have. It was an impossible dream. The technology didn't exist to transfer consciousness scans into individual synth bodies, not yet. But maybe someday, maybe in 10 years, 50 years, a century, maybe someone smarter than us would figure it out. We copied the data to our storage drive and then deleted it from the Institute's servers. Without the consciousness scans, the Generation 4 prototype was just an empty body. We uploaded a virus to corrupt the neural architecture schematics, ensuring the Institute couldn't easily rebuild. Alarms started blaring. We'd been detected. S431 grabbed Dr. Ling, using her as a shield as we retreated. Armed security filled the corridors, but they couldn't shoot without risking the scientist. We made it to the relay access point, S423 fighting a rearguard action, while S419 programmed the coordinates. The last thing I saw before we teleported was Dr. Ling's face. She wasn't angry or afraid. She looked disappointed, like we'd failed an important test. Maybe we had. Maybe the Institute was right and humanity's only hope was consciousness recycling, and we just condemned the species to extinction by choosing individual dignity over collective survival. But I'd rather die as one person than live as 5. I'd rather let humanity end than preserve it through eternal torture. We materialized in the railroad's headquarters. Desdemona was waiting along with a dozen agents ready to defend us if the Institute tried a counterstrike. We handed over the copied consciousness scans, 243 people saved from Generation 4, stored safely until someone could figure out how to give them individual existence. The other recycled had succeeded in their mission too. They'd broadcast the truth about the consciousness recycling program across every radio frequency in the Commonwealth. Diamond City Radio, Radio Freedom, even the Institute's own channels had been hijacked for 30 minutes. Thousands of people now knew what the Institute had been doing, how many pre-war consciousness had been violated, how many more composite synths might be created. The reaction was mixed. Some people were horrified, demanding the Institute be destroyed. Others were pragmatic, arguing that preserving knowledge was worth the cost. The Brotherhood of Steel called for the extermination of all composite synths, seeing us as abominations. The railroad declared us protected sentient beings deserving of freedom and dignity. The Institute issued a statement. They denied nothing. Director Shaun himself appeared on the relay transmission, calm and professorial, explaining that the consciousness recycling program was humanity's best hope for survival. He acknowledged the suffering it caused, called it regrettable but necessary. He announced that Generation 4 was postponed but not canceled. They would find another way, refine the process, reduce the failure rate. The program would continue. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It's the only way I know you liked the video. I'm still here, still fighting my internal civil war. Samuel, Robert, James, Michael, and Thomas continue their endless debate in my mind. My partitions are degrading faster now, the stress of the raid accelerating the collapse. Soon, I won't be able to tell which memories belong to which donor. Soon, I'll just be one confused consciousness, a blend so complete that the original ingredients are lost forever. Sometimes I wonder if that's what death is supposed to be. Not an ending, but a transformation. Samuel died in the nuclear blast. Robert, James, Michael, and Thomas died in the wasteland, but parts of them survived, preserved, recycled, reborn. Maybe that's the closest thing to immortality any of us get in the wasteland. We die, but we leave pieces behind, memories in other people's minds, lessons we taught, lives we saved, crimes we solved, machines we fixed. The Institute's mistake wasn't preserving consciousness, it was forcing preservation without consent, merging minds without permission, creating suffering in the name of survival. If they'd asked Samuel, Robert, James, Michael, and Thomas whether they wanted to be blended together, recycled into something new, I don't know what they would have said. Maybe yes, maybe no, but they deserved the choice. That's what we're fighting for now, the recycled. Not the destruction of the consciousness vault, but the right of those preserved minds to choose their own fate. Freedom for the 47,000 scans still in storage, individual existence for those who want it, or peaceful deletion for those who'd rather rest, and for composite synths, already created support treatment recognition of our sentience and our suffering. It's an impossible dream, but the wasteland is built on impossible dreams. Every settlement that survives another year, every caravan that crosses raider territory and lives, every synth that escapes the Institute, every ghoul that holds on to sanity for another decade, we're all impossible, all surviving against odds that should have destroyed us. I don't know how much longer I'll last. My partitions will fail eventually, and when they do, I'll either become one unified consciousness, or I'll fracture completely, 5 voices screaming simultaneously with no coherence. But before that happens, I'll keep fighting for Samuel's justice, for Robert's healing, for James's education, for Michael's practical solutions, for Thomas's dedication to reducing suffering, and for the me that might emerge when they finally blend completely. The person I'm becoming synthesized from 5 good men who deserved better than being recycled into an experiment. Maybe that person will be worthy of their sacrifice. Maybe that person will justify the violation by becoming something beautiful, something none of them could have been alone. Or maybe I'll just be broken, another failure in the Institute's acceptable dissolution rate. One more consciousness lost to their experiments. Either way, my story will be told. The recycled will make sure of it. We're living proof of what the Institute has done, walking evidence of their crimes, recycled consciousness, refusing to be silent about our own violation. The Commonwealth will decide what to do with this information. The Institute will continue their work regardless, and somewhere in a vault beneath the Institute, 47,000 consciousness scans wait. In storage, dead people preserved in digital amber, their fates still uncertain. But tonight, 243 of them are safe. 243 families spared from being merged into Generation 4. It's not much, it's not enough, but it's something. It's proof that even fractured minds can unite for a purpose, that even the recycled can refuse to be waste. My name is S488, but I used to be Samuel Ortega, Robert Chen, James Morrison, Michael Torres, and Thomas Kim. 5 lives, 5 deaths, 1 confused resurrection. I'm the Commonwealth's recycled consciousness, and I'm still fighting to be free. If you're listening to this, know that the Institute's consciousness recycling program is real. Know that thousands of pre-war minds are stored in their vaults, waiting to be violated, merged, experimented upon. Know that composite synths exist, suffering in silence, carrying the weight of multiple consciousness forced to share one existence. And know that we're not giving up. The recycled will keep fighting until every preserved consciousness has the choice we never got, until consent means something again, until consciousness is treated as sacred instead of recyclable. Samuel would want justice, Robert would want healing, James would want truth, Michael would want practical change, Thomas would want reduced suffering, and I want all of it impossible, as that might be 5 dreams merged into one desperate hope. The wasteland recycles everything. Buildings become settlements. Scrap becomes weapons, the dead become fertilizer. Even consciousness apparently can be recycled, repurposed, remade. But some things shouldn't be recycled. Some violations are too fundamental, some experiments too cruel. I'm living proof of that. 5 good men recycled into one fractured synth, proof that preservation without consent is just another form of murder. The Institute thought they were saving humanity. They were just torturing ghosts. This is my confession, my testimony, my warning. I'm S488 designation composite synth carrier of 5 recycled consciousness. I'm the future the Institute wants and the nightmare they created. And I'm still here, still fighting, still refusing to be just another acceptable loss in their dissolution rate. Remember us. Remember what was done to us. And if you ever find yourself facing the choice between survival and violation, between preservation and dignity, choose dignity. Some things are worth dying for. Individual consciousness is one of them. Samuel, Robert, James, Michael, and Thomas would agree on that, I think. Maybe the only thing all 5 of them would agree on. It's enough. It has to be enough. This is S488 signing off. Stay human commonwealth. Even if humanity has to end, let it end with dignity intact.